Hi, I'm Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com, and I also live stream here on YouTube. Today I want to talk about planning for a long-term transformation after an awakening. Too often when people come to me, they're thinking very much in the short term, and why not? Nobody really talks about these things as we grow up from being kids to adults, that you might have this multi-year experience of transformation that will arise spontaneously on its own. It's not usually the common thing that goes on in households, is it? And so nobody's really prepared for what's being asked of them. If we're all caterpillars, you would all have a communal caterpillar knowledge bank of, oh, there's this time for the chrysalis, and this is what you do to build one, and where you build one, and how you prepare for it, and how you transform into a butterfly. But that doesn't seem to be what arises for everyone. It seems like the spontaneous awakening, as I talk about it, is actually very rare. And so the type of awakening, when I'm talking about this term, I'm talking about something that just takes over, that starts moving on its own. Something is realized within. The truth is realized within. This awakened awareness, this interconnection, the universal love, the truth, the presence of all of life is realized, and something starts to move on its own. This divine energy comes out of hibernation and says, whoa, it's time to start growing. And so it's like the seed starting to sprout. But that's not the end of the story, is it, when a seed sprouts? And so I'm really encouraging anybody who has this sort of awakening, that it's going through them all day long. That doesn't stop at night. It keeps moving. It's not something that you have to try to do. But I'm encouraging people with this arising to plan for it. Now, it sounds kind of funny because so much of what we talk about is surrender to what's going on inside. But I think that it's really important to consider the crucible, the space, the chrysalis that we create to hold ourselves in while we go through something that may last years. It's very common in my experience with the people that I've worked with that it's between 1 and 3 years of a lot of the interchange, which means you don't have a lot of energy to do a lot of other things in your life. Unfortunately, most of us have this kind of sprung upon us, so we're not really in a position to expect anything or to have pre-planned anything, because that's kind of nature of something that's spontaneous, just arises on its own. And depending on how much pain is already being brought up inside, it can be kind of difficult to go into this sort of planning mode, and especially when your brain feels kind of like it's being rewired. But I encourage you to do it anyway. The typical way people kind of approach it is really from a sense of, oh, this is going to last a couple weeks, a couple months. No, I really want you to think years. For those who have the spiritual opening that feels really good for a couple of days, weeks, or months, you know that will die down and you kind of go back to wherever you were. Right? There's not this bringing up of issues, constant new realizations about what's true for yourself and what's true about life that really arises out of the awakened space for somebody who's had that true awakening that I'm talking about. And there's nothing wrong with having a spiritual opening. You know, just apply those things that you learn when you're in that space of clarity into your life. Deepen in your practice, deepen in your healing. For anybody who's just had an opening, it's really important to be disciplined in going towards issues, not just waiting for them to come up. When you're in an awakening, they're coming up. You can't get away from them. As much as many of you might like to, you can't. But that's also part of the truth of understanding you can't get away from yourself. And awakening really, really, really shows you that truth. You cannot get away from your light or your dark. And you get both kind of smashed in your face for a while. And that long time may be several years. Everyone is different. I use plant metaphors so you can think about yourself as like if you're growing into this beautiful, huge oak tree, that's going to take a lot longer than if you're growing into this beautiful little sagebrush or into a pea pod plant. You know, those have different life cycles, different growth, different needs. And you're on the path to understand what those needs are. And I really encourage you to start to pay attention as soon as you can to what's coming up, where you're feeling it in your body, what are the emotions that are coming up. Because that will help you to understand what sort of supports you need. I don't want to overgeneralize this because everybody's lessons and how you're going to evolve and change through things is quite different. But in my experience, when all this energy is really working through stuff, going to those deeper phases of healing and opening you, you're not going to have a lot of energy, usually. So you're going to need a way to take care of yourself financially and to find different supports, whether it's in your spiritual practice, meditation, or journaling. And some of those things work at certain times, and other times they absolutely do not. It's like when you're working through different heart and body issues, writing about them just doesn't do anything really. But when you're still kind of understanding intellectually, and that's usually at the beginning parts after awakening, then that's useful, right? You start to kind of understand what you know, all this that's coming up and the realities that are being presented to you. So there's certain tools that you're going to want, and they're going to evolve at different times, depending on what is arising inside and what's being asked of you. Certain supports in terms of people, whether it's a spiritual teacher or healer at certain points, that one can be kind of tricky because there are definitely ways where, I mean, I'm a spiritual teacher, there are ways where like we can be really useful at times, and other times where you just have to go in on your own and be with what's coming up, that the intelligence within you is already teaching you anyway. So there's a balance there, and sometimes there's, an extra supported boost is really important. And other times you don't want to disturb the waters any more than they're already being disturbed. They're already being grown. All those wonderful things are opening up inside. And you also want to think about maybe a spiritual caretaker. A spiritual caretaker doesn't help you to understand what's arising inside. They just have space for you to go sleep on their couch, or to, crash in their spare room, or it could be a monastery, that has work trade things that, you could do a little bit of work, but then you have plenty of time to go inwards and take care of yourself. Some of us, we can make a lot of money and then be out of the job for a while and we're taken care of. Some other people have done stuff through freelance work, and so they can kind of fit in sometimes where they can kind of think in their old ways, whether it's computer stuff or recruiting or writing or graphic design, those types of freelance things. Those have been other ways where people have been able to take care of themselves. So I really want you to think in those terms of having space to be alone. Now, I know this is really challenging for my friends who are parents, because especially if you have small kids, you have a lot of demands on your time and your kids need that attention. But I think part of the spiritual caretaking group of people, that core group of people that you want to consider, are people who can be babysitters more regularly, so that you can have some time throughout your day or maybe a whole weekend where you can drop into your own space. And I've found that this divine energy inside us is pretty smart, that if it knows you're going to take care of yourself, as opposed to resisting, which is the big problem for most people on the spiritual path, but if it knows that you're doing this, and really it's just you, as long as you know that you're doing this, somehow that seems to work out. So you have time to go collapse and be a hot mess for a couple of days, come out of it, then go back to taking care of your kids. There's no hard, easy solutions I can point you to because it's so different for everybody. But what I mainly want to emphasize is that this is a long-term transformation. You're not going back to the old way that you were living because that wasn't truthful to you. The real you is showing you what matters to you in their phases of healing and deepening into growth, and then stepping back out into the world in a new way. And that stepping back out can be years away. It's not necessarily going to always be that for everyone. Once again, I can't overgeneralize. But I just really want you to take the long-term view, to put yourself in the space where you can best go inwards, you can best take care of yourself, and you can make this a little bit easier than it otherwise would be. And the other way would be just resisting it, not acknowledging it, hoping it's going to get over soon. And that makes for some very miserable transformations or stuck transformations, and it's not a happy time. So I offer you this as an encouragement to make it easier on yourself. This is a beautiful process. The person that grows out of this space is just such a beautiful being, and there's such beauty inside all of us. And there's no need to add any more duress to a challenging transformation on the path to becoming a butterfly. So I hope these thoughts are helpful. Once again, my name is Jim Tolles. You can find me on my blog at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. And have a beautiful rest of your day.